Welcome to the Politics of Everything. I'm Amber Daines, your host and podcast producer. This is a half hour of power, a podcast dropping every week where I unpack the politics of everything, from money to motherhood, nutrition to narcissism, startups to secularism, the environment, quality, and much, much more. Our guests are seasoned in the field or topic of their choice, even if you've not heard of them yet. This is a non-partisan show. So while I love exploring varied views and get a buzz from a healthy debate of ideas, this is not a purely blue, white, green program. Please subscribe, tune in and enjoy the politics of everything. Software as a service, or SaaS, is a way of delivering applications over the internet as a service. Instead of installing and maintaining software, you simply access it via the internet, freeing yourself from complex software and hardware management. SaaS applications are sometimes called web-based software, on-demand software, or hosted software. Whatever the name, SaaS applications run on SaaS providers' servers. The provider manages access to the application, including security, availability, and performance. Many of us use these applications daily. Today, I speak to an expert in this area. Nathan Gampel is the CEO of Simpel and Associates, who are known as business transformation specialists. And for more than 2 decades, Nathan has advised leading organisations on the most complex change programs. This could be anything from private equity-led mergers and acquisitions to modernizing how global organisations work. Nathan helps these companies win at change. He's also the inventor of Kinetic Transformation, a patent-pending algorithm for understanding change at scale and creating action that beat the 70% challenge. So anyone who wants to understand the world of SaaS and so much more, this is your episode. And I warmly welcome Nathan to the Politics of Everything.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Amber, and thank you for having me.
Podcasting remotely can be challenging, but it doesn't have to be. Since 2017, I have relied on Zencastr's all-in-one web-based solution to make the process quick and painless, the way podcasting should be. If you know me, I'm pretty obsessed with quality guests, quality content, and quality sound, and that's what Zencastr allows me to do. Not to mention, it's really easy to use, even for my guests that aren't particularly tech savvy. There's nothing to download, they just click on the link and we start recording. Zencastr is all about making your podcasting experience easy, and with everything from local recording to automatic post-production, all in the one tool, you don't have to leave your browser to get each episode done. I want you to have the same great experience that I do for all my podcasts and content needs. So I have a special offer for you. If you go to zen.ai/politics of everything and enter this promo code, you'll get 30% off in your first 3 months when you sign up to Zencastr Pro. That's zen.ai, politics of everything. It's now time to share your story. I always love to start off by asking my guests what they wanted to be when they were kids. And, you know, in some ways, can we join the dots from what you thought you might be as a kid or a teenager to where you are now? Is there a bit of a career trajectory that you can kind of take us on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll share with you, I guess, a little story that, folks who know me know very well. So what I wanted to be when I was younger was actually an artist. And it sounds funny for someone who is a corporate consultant, but back when I was a kid or in my younger years, I was very into self-expression, being and really being creative and allowing that creativity to flow. And when I told my parents, who are both still actually working professionals, that I wanted to be an artist, they both sighed and said, "Oh, come on, get real. That's not really going to happen.
You're not going to make any money." Was that maybe their thought?
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like, hey, maybe you could try this doctor or this accountant thing. It probably will work out better. But yeah, I really wanted to be an artist, and it's funny. But over the course of my career, even though I started out in banking and ended up at Big Four Consulting, I actually did end up living my dream and becoming an artist. I'm a business consultant, which in a way allows me to be an artist because, every project I go into and every client that I work with, I always have to understand, I have to blend in, and I always have to play that role. And so, even though I'm an organization psychologist working in a professional setting, I still feel like I'm living out my dream of being an artist, being creative, and really fitting in and trying to work within strange and fast-moving environments, playing a role to help the team and helping companies win.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad to see that all kind of worked out for you. So, getting into our topic today, SaaS platforms obviously involve software that's available via third party over the internet. And some household name examples might be, Google Workspace, which I use, Salesforce, BigCommerce. There's a whole stream of them, if you like. These are now really popular. They're the main way that we kind of get our software. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when that wasn't the case. I think I might have bought some discs, some CDs, and actually uploaded software from that a number of years ago. And that sort of was the norm, if you like. Do you remember, or can you explain to us how this kind of SaaS platform kind of started and evolved? And really for all of us, it's generally what we do every day. We might not even realize we're using it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, what's funny about that? Well, first of all, I'm also old enough to remember when it all started. But if I had to sum it up in one word, kind of what's happened and how we got there, the word I'd probably use is Lego.
Mm.
So what I mean by that is when, a number of years ago when we were starting out and, you had a program that would be installed on premises and you had to work with, oftentimes, kind of like cable TV, you would get a whole package of features, a whole package of channels, if you will. And really, you only use this little piece or that little piece. And so what happened was, these big programs were resident and were part of work when really you only might have needed a specific piece. And so this demand for flexibility or this demand to really build your own solution, at least to me, like Lego, is really how SaaS got started, or at least got started and took off as quickly as it did. And technically, it was also, kind of the growth and advent of the API as part of that. And so, instead of having these big hulking platforms or these big hulking programs, now you could really select what you want. You don't have to have it installed on site. It can be on the cloud, and you can really piece things together that you want, especially with kind of the growth and the improvement of APIs and other integration technologies. So again, to me, it was really about that desire to build the model or build the solution as you want it with the pieces that you want. And as the technology grew and as technology became a lot more specific and functionalized, if you will, as a SaaS, that's what really took off. And, as it started, it was no secret that it was going to grow because, again, it just satisfied that desire to really customize and get what you want when you want it and where you want it.
Is there a company or platform that really is the kind of hero or the starting point of SaaS? Is there a particular household name which, might sort of in some ways people go, oh, I remember the first time I bought that, online. That was my first entree into SaaS. Is there something or a particular company that stands out for you in that way?
Yeah, obviously it's hard to, it's kind of like saying, what's your favorite music album of all
Or
time?
your favorite child or something?
Exactly. It's like so hard to pick one, but I think off the top of my head, if I had to pick one that really is standing out these days, it's Salesforce,
Yeah.
or the Salesforce CRM. And the reason is, particularly here in the States, Salesforce has, really been shown to be not only a fast growing company, but also a resilient company, even in the face of a lot of challenge. And it's always funny to me, it's so widely held as an investment. And when I speak to people who may not be as knowledgeable about a SaaS and what SaaS is, and I ask them, what Salesforce is, so to speak, they don't really understand. They know it has something to do with sales, but they don't really understand what it means. And I think that's what makes SaaS so interesting. It's kind of like what you said at the start. People, I think, who may be uninitiated or less aware or less familiar, they may take for granted the fact that you can just pop open a phone, access a program, and all of your data on the cloud wherever you are at any given point. And I think Salesforce is really a revolutionary product because I think once people really understand what it is and how it took activities, let's say that 20, 30 years ago, we all took for granted and turned it into a system or turned it into a solution that we can access and gives us data and gives us rich data. I think if people actually take the time to think about it, it's programs and solutions like that where, really the SaaS has become the job and the job can't be separated from the SaaS anymore. And although I don't think there's one solution that jumps out, I think it's solutions like Salesforce that have really grown up and redefined what it is to, let's say, in the modern world, be a salesperson or manage sales operations. I think when folks kind of start to understand it that way and say, wait, 20 years ago, a good salesperson was someone who followed up and did this stuff. And today we take it for granted that all that's in Salesforce. And so I think when people stop to think about it and realize maybe what the job is today versus what it was 20 years ago, programs like that or SaaS programs like that, it really is remarkable how quickly that they've grown, how quickly they've infiltrated, but also how quickly we've grown to take it for granted that they've really changed our lives in so many ways.
Absolutely. So cloud computing and SaaS have come a long way, as we've been discussing in this show so far. Increased awareness and uptake has accelerated the growth of SaaS products and led to the rise of, say, SaaS integration platforms such as infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. Companies will continue to outsource some of their non-core IT activities to specialist service providers sometimes who can just do it better, and particularly if they're a big organization, they'll have the resources to do that. So the cloud approach in some ways can help all of us at different levels of business, whether you're sort of a startup through to, your big four consulting to every other sort of business out there. I guess my question is, and you may not be a cyber risk expert, but I have thought about this before, that security risks that you kind of naturally open yourself up to because you're in this cloud world all of a sudden. We talk about privacy and social media, for example, and our security and what we share. But really, you're giving away a lot of data if you're kind of, your entire sales platform, for example, and your channels are being managed by an external company. Is there something that we need to sort of think about and be aware of, or are there checks and balances that these companies have to go through to allow them to provide that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is definitely a complicated question. So I'm going to try and break it down into three parts. I think the first thing is, kind of the general answer, which is yes. So there are people who are definitely much better and much more versed in cybersecurity than me. But what I will say as somebody who works with a lot of SaaS platforms, does a lot of SaaS integration and a lot of SaaS solutions, what I would say is that cybersecurity is clearly something that's on everyone's mind, especially, I do a lot of work with financial services organizations like banks, insurance companies, and also on the pharma side or on the healthcare side as well. And so, there is definitely increased awareness, I would say, around cybersecurity. And what I would say is that as that increased awareness is growing and as the models become more complex or evolve, the cybersecurity needs are definitely changing. So what I would say is it's interesting. Cybersecurity is always something that folks are aware of, but as the solutions become more and more complicated, the need to develop customized solutions for cybersecurity in particular that take into account all the interconnections, all the different programs, all the different platforms. Obviously that's a primary concern, and it's driving a lot of influence and a lot of change right now in the market. Some of that change is good, some of that change is not so good. And those are kind of the two other points I would make.
Yeah.
I would say, to go a little bit deeper, the change that is good is, the more and more that these models become ubiquitous or become more common, the more that you'll find more generalist solutions, right? Because folks are, let's say, connecting a CRM to a marketing platform, to a work automation platform. And so as those integrations become more and more common, naturally you're able to standardize and get some more scale, even if you have a very specific model. But at the same time, just like with anything with regulation or anything where it comes to security and kind of preventive measures, there's that tough balance between, are you being so preventative that you're stifling innovation, and how do you enable innovation to live with the regulation and with the with the prohibitions and with the security and all the things that hold you back, but also hold you back for good reason. So I think it's a complicated question, and a lot of it has to do with the specificity of the model. As you get standardization, as it becomes similar, that will grow. But then at the same time, that balance of cost benefit is something that is pertinent. And obviously, depending on the industry, like banking will be different than, let's say, retail, right? All records are obviously precious, and all data obviously needs to be protected with the highest degree of certainty. But there are also certain specific, needs that have to be accounted for that go above and beyond. And so I think as time goes on and as people become more comfortable with these models, it's going to continue to be an issue and continue to push the industry to think differently and find opportunities.
So what role does SaaS play in business transformation? Because I know that's one of your sweet spots, and how, and perhaps do you have an example which some of us maybe might be able to relate to? Because I always think if you can picture something because it's explained with a real life example, that can help some of us non-technical people understand this a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an interesting question, right? Because whenever I talk, so I do specialize in transformation, and I specialize in what's referred to as work automation, or the idea of how do you digitize work so that you can simplify or even automate the stuff that doesn't add value, so that people can focus more on the stuff that does. And so, one of the examples that I've been giving recently to folks is the example of a swimming pool. And so, I'm fortunate enough to have a swimming pool. My wife wanted one, and it was like a lifelong dream. And so, a few years ago, we decided to get a home with a swimming pool. And as a boy from the Bronx, learning a swimming pool was extremely complicated for me. And the first year I broke the filter. The second year I did something else wrong. But by the third year, I started to understand how the pool worked. And what I realized was all the pool is a giant biochemistry and physics experiment, right? It's physics because the motor is pulling water and cycling it back, and the biochemistry is the chemicals that you add to, let's say, prevent algae from growing and to keep the water clean and fresh. And that's kind of how I like to think about, let's say a SaaS solution, especially in transformation. Oftentimes there are activities that we all do that we take for granted, whether it's filtering a swimming pool, sometimes it's project management, sometimes it's being in accounts payable and, or an accounts receivable and processing that purchase order. But every day, all of us do work, and work can be thought of generally as kind of two things. There's the stuff that's repeatable and the stuff that is standardizable, kind of like the swimming pool example of pulling in the water through the filter. And then there's the biochemistry part, which is really highly specialized, requires a lot of testing and kind of getting it right. And if you break down work that way between, the stuff that's really esoteric and knowledge related versus the stuff that's kind of predictable and repeatable, that's really where SaaS, in my mind, from transformation becomes very powerful. It's not about trying to digitize everything, transform everything. It's about looking for the opportunities, and this is the key word, where it enhances what you do, right?
Yes.
Which is why the word outsourcing always has such a bad connotation, because we're taking something and giving it to someone. No, no, no. We're enhancing how the business does something. We're looking for opportunities to enhance so that we free up capacity so that we could spend more time on the biochemistry, because I'd rather spend more time swimming and less time worrying about things like a filter, which is handled by an engine anyways.
Yeah.
And that's how I like to think about SaaS and transformation. It's finding, understanding work, breaking it down into the stuff that requires the expertise, the stuff that can be, let's say, automated, and then really going at that automation in a way that it is not an outcome, but rather a feature of the process, so it enhances what we do every day.
I think you've explained that very clearly. So thank you. It's a very complicated question, I know. Look, the sector is starting to mature, consolidate, and harmonise like a lot of different sectors do over time. Recently, we saw a buyout of the Apollo program by Stagwell, for example. Is lack of competition a risk for SaaS products, or is that not the case? What's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, so it really depends how you look at SaaS product, right? Because SaaS product it can be an extremely broad field, right? So from a competition perspective, of course, right? Let's say CRM, we spoke about Salesforce, but even though Salesforce might be the biggest, it's not the only game in town. You have HubSpot, you have so many other products that are out there. And the challenge, going back to the example before about transformation is, and I think you see this a lot, and it really does influence competition, is the notion that people sometimes try and push the solution as opposed to it being a feature of a process that enhances the process. The solution sometimes becomes the problem. And I think that's where the competition oftentimes comes in, because there's certainly no shortage of products. Like if any area becomes generally accepted, like CRM or marketing automation or whatever, you know, there's going to be no shortage of companies that are going to flood the space, because if the market is validated, to create a, some level of automation, oftentimes, it's not that hard. Like you saw this, for instance, in marketing over the last several years. I think I saw a picture somewhere that there were something like thousands of marketing automation tools, right?
Yes.
It can't be that all of them are going to survive, and all of them are satisfying a different need, right? There's probably a lot of overlap. And so for me, I think competition is of course something, and I think it's something big. I think what's going to define competition is going to be two things. Number one, making sure that the solution doesn't become the problem, right? So as more competition and shiny new objects come, not running to the shiny object because that might create more of a problem. But number two, and this is perhaps to me the more interesting idea, is SaaS is a concept which really anyone can do. Anyone can create their own SaaS product if they want to digitally enhance what they're doing. It's just a matter of, like I said, using the right process. And that's a big part of what I do every day. When I help two companies merge, or, I run $100 million transformation of a global organization, right? I'm not trying to solve world hunger. What I'm trying to do is help a client get from point A to point B in the best possible way. And that best possible way can oftentimes involve digital enhancement. And so that's the interesting thing about SaaS, is that it feels like it's a high barrier to entry, but it's actually not. And if you do it the right way and you understand how digital transformation works the right way, oftentimes clients will buy, the shiny new thing, but then they'll build a lot of technology around it to enhance it. And that's what makes SaaS so cool. And like Lego, is you can build SaaS, you can build product, you can build custom products. The technology is so friendly that it makes it easy, as long as you understand what it's doing and how to make it a feature rather than an outcome. You can build your own SaaS products and forget competition, rather give yourself enough of an enhancement that you're able to leapfrog and really find the solution that works for you. And that's what I love so much about SaaS solutions.
So this is probably a natural next question. So what kind of products and innovations do you see happening in the next few years with SaaS? A bit of a crystal ball, if you like, and who will they really benefit? What are you seeing in that space at the moment?
Yeah, so I think what you're going to start seeing a lot, and I think you're already seeing it. It's kind of like at the birth of AI. Well, AI has been around for like 50, 60 years, but in the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a massive resurgence of, let's say, artificial intelligence. And without going too much or too far into a tangent, one of the criticisms of AI has always been, AI gets better and better, but it's really not thinking. It's not a computer that's creative and thinking. It's getting better at finding patterns and finding data. And so a lot of folks attempted to create programs, and I worked with some early startups like this, to make AI more accessible and more drop and play, kind of like early days of Microsoft Windows, where you create almost like a GUI or a graphic user interface that makes it approachable. So like with AI, making AI driven process flows, but doing it almost with like plug and play or drop and load, makes it more accessible, makes it more ubiquitous, and makes it more usable. So I don't think that AI has taken off to that degree, but to answer your question, that's kind of what I see happening with SaaS, in my opinion.
Hmm.
As the tools become easier and easier, and we can go really deep on the tech, but there are so many tools out there that make it so user friendly, compared to only 10 years ago. Almost anyone can kind of watch a YouTube video these days with a couple of bucks, or even free in some cases, find the tools that you need and create a solution that works for you. And to illustrate it, I created my own SaaS product, which the patent pending product you mentioned earlier, and it was really the same idea. It was an idea, it was a theory, it was an algorithm, and then there were so many tools available. And because I understood how to look at work and how to drive that process to turn it into a SaaS solution, that barrier to entry has become a lot lower. And so to me, that's what I really see as the big changes. It's less, it's kind of that Lego example. As people become more and more comfortable with SaaS, as protocols around data security, as understanding how these different architectures work and how flexible they are, it just becomes so much more accessible to the layperson. Maybe not the layperson, maybe we're a bit away from that, but it becomes more accessible to, let's say, that medium term user. And I think what you're starting to see, and I see it, in fact, today I saw it with two of my clients, with two separate clients. Both of them started creating the basis for solutions, stringing together, let's say, this data reporting, this database, stringing it together, and they're almost creating their own SaaS solutions, which are customized for themselves. So to me, that's kind of what I see is, as SaaS, as an idea, as this idea or this notion of digitizing to enhance, continues to gain acceptance, as people continue to develop their understanding, and as the tools continue to get better, I think it's just going to become more accessible. And again, it's good because if you view it as an enhancement, then it doesn't take my job. Rather, it helps me do my job better, and it helps me deliver better outcomes for shareholders, clients, customers, colleagues, and the like. And again, that's a really good thing.
Changing approach a little bit, who have been your sort of number one or two career or life mentors, and why? Would you like to give them a bit of a plug while we're having this conversation? I'm always a believer that people don't get to where they are without having some fabulous people who support them and maybe inspire them along the way. I mean, who would be your one or two that would really stand out for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So unfortunately, I'm probably not the most exciting. I'm sure everyone gives an example like Elon Musk or whatever. And while some of those people are certainly inspiring, the people that have inspired me most are actually my family, my dad and my wife. I write about it a bit in my book, but like my wife taught me, she's not a businesswoman by any stretch. She's a registered dietitian. She's a medical nutrition therapist. And so she couldn't be in a more different field than, let's say, me, but she taught me some basic ideas, over the course of our 20 plus relationship. She taught me basic ideas about people and about how people interact and the importance of relationships. And I got to tell you, no matter how digitized we get, no matter how complicated life gets, the reality is basic lessons like treat people well. If something's confusing, don't just shoot an email out of anger, pick up the phone. It's a good thing to maintain personal connections. Just basic ideas about how to treat people in life, whether it's in business or in personal. I really learned a lot from my wife. And, I do give her a lot of credit because it was really that influence that helped me develop EQ. And as I got my second master's in organization psychology and started working in the field of consulting, even if I got more technical on the finance side or the technology side or the whatever side, those basic principles of relationships have always stuck with me and have always made a difference. And, as far as my dad goes, since you did ask for two, my dad always taught me to never quit and to never give up, to be persistent. And it's never over when it's over, and probably killed me for saying this, but, my dad had a heart problem for a number of years. And, he had a heart scare a little while ago. And I was so sad, and I called him and I was like depressed. And he goes to me, hey, Nathan, you're in the tech space. You know anyone who's working on artificial hearts or anything? And I started laughing because I'm like, look at this guy. He just had a heart event. And this guy's, not only is he still fighting, he's going to rack his brain and find the most creative way around things. And, I think it's a great lesson. Be persistent. If you're focused on something that's good and you believe in it, be persistent. Never stop challenging yourself and never give up, because you're your own best advocate. And if you give up, then it's over. But if you're always fighting, you've always got a chance. And those lessons with relationships and kind of persistence have really stuck with me, and I think really influenced me in my career.
As we wrap up our conversation today, would you have a final takeaway message for us on the world of SaaS? What would you like the audience to kind of walk away remembering most about our conversation today?
What I would say is always remember to make sure that SaaS is an enhancement. So I know I said it a few times, but the idea is, you see this a lot again, where someone says, okay, we have a deficiency in marketing, so we need a solution. Sometimes the solution is actually worse, right? The solution can actually create problems, right? Sometimes it's like I've been explaining, you don't need a full product. Maybe what you need is just a process automation, and the solution is something you can do yourself or do more simple. And frankly, that alone could save you millions, and frankly, at scale, even billions. And so that would be probably my biggest piece of advice for the world of SaaS is, don't let the solution become the problem. Figure out what you want, figure out why you want it, figure out what you're trying to accomplish. And then, just like all things, keep it simple, right? Figure out what you want, why you want it, go for it, test and learn, and make sure that as you roll these things out, or as you build these things, make sure that you're not running for the shiny new thing, because the reality is it may look good now, but believe me, 6 months from now, when you're trying to implement that big new system and get everyone to buy into it, believe me, you'll regret not keeping it simple.
Fantastic. It's been such a fantastic conversation. We've covered a lot in our time together. And if you do want to connect further with Nathan, there will be some details on the show notes. Until next time, take care. Thanks so much for listening today. If you've enjoyed the politics of everything, I thrive on your feedback. So please add a short review and share the podcast with your network through Apple, Spotify, and all the usual suspects. I'm always on the hunt for new and diverse guests, so if you or someone you know has a fresh idea you're busting to get out there, please email me at amber@amberdanes.com and my crew will get back to you very soon.